At 9:23 hours on June 14, 2025, calm seas in the South China Sea hid the storm about to unfold. The USS Princeton, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, was conducting what should have been another routine freedom of navigation patrol when her Aegis radar picked up a contact accelerating at an unusual pace. Within seconds, the blip sharpened into the unmistakable outline of a Chinese Type 052D destroyer, surging from 18 to 30 knots in less than 2 minutes. Unknown to the American sailors, the Chinese captain had just received a direct order from Beijing. Intercept the Americans, force a confrontation, and make them blink first. But Beijing was about to learn a brutal lesson. Challenging the U.S. Navy in open waters is the quickest way to humiliate yourself. The standoff begins. At 0926, classification was confirmed. A 052D Luoyang, 3-class destroyer, heavily armed and on an aggressive vector. Inside the Princeton's Combat Information Center, the tactical action officer monitored calmly. He knew the cruiser carried 122 vertical launch cells, enough firepower to erase any ship within 240 nautical miles. The destroyer was charging toward its engagement zone, but every second that passed, the math tilted against Beijing. The U.S. carrier strike group led by the USS Nimitz was 180 nautical miles from the nearest Chinese territory, well inside international waters, where $3.4 trillion in trade flows every year. This was a textbook patrol, predictable course, transparent intentions, and professional conduct. But the Chinese wanted theater, not safety, and they were about to get it. Escalation. By 9:30, the Princeton's cooperative engagement capability had already pushed threat data across the strike group. The USS Nimitz, 104,600 tons of floating air power, with 90 of the world's most advanced aircraft on board, adjusted flight ops instantly. The destroyers Chung Hoon and Kidd shifted their positions, wrapping a defensive shield around the carrier. Any Chinese attack would turn into a suicide note. At 9:35, the tactical picture grew darker. An E-2D Hawkeye, circling at 25,000 feet, reported multiple aircraft launches from the Chinese carrier Shandong. Radar signatures showed J-15 fighters climbing hard, straining for altitude. But the American controllers noticed something almost comical. The Chinese jets were already burning fuel at an unsustainable rate, limited by the ski-jump launch system that crippled payload and endurance. Moments later, sonar operators added another complication. A noisy acoustic contact, likely a Type 039 submarine, creeping clumsily 80 nautical miles away. Between the carrier, the destroyer, and the submarine, Beijing had tried to stage a multi-domain intimidation campaign. Instead, they had assembled a museum exhibit of outdated platforms. American response. By 9:37, the Nimitz's flight deck erupted. FA-18E Super Hornets screamed off the catapults at 45-second intervals, while EA-18G Growlers established jamming orbits. This wasn't a scramble, it was a precision ballet America has perfected for 75 years. Every Hornet carried full combat loads, and every pilot was wired into Link 16. When one aircraft saw the enemy, they all saw it. The Chinese pilots weren't so lucky. Their radar swept like a lighthouse, slow and predictable, while their communications crackled with delays and confusion. Within minutes, Growler jamming pods reduced their situational awareness to static. Phantom targets multiplied, real ones vanished, and the J-15 pilots found themselves outnumbered by shadows before even seeing the enemy. Moments of tension. At 0947, the Chinese destroyer pushed the standoff to the edge of war. Its Type 346A phased array radar stopped searching and locked onto the Nimitz with fire control precision, the electronic equivalent of pointing a loaded gun. In any other navy, this would have triggered immediate retaliation, but U.S. crews are drilled to perfection. Calmly, they recorded every second, every frequency, every bearing. Meanwhile, one Chinese fighter broke formation, diving aggressively at a Hornet in what pilots call a thump. The American response? Pure Top Gun. The Hornet rolled inverted, slid behind the J-15, and held the enemy squarely in his sights. One squeeze would have fired an AIM-9X straight into the Chinese jet's engines. He didn't pull the trigger. Professional discipline prevailed, but the message was unmistakable. We own you. The final humiliation. At 9:51, the Chinese submarine made its move and its final mistake. Surfacing its snorkel to recharge batteries, it broadcasted its position like a beacon. The Princeton sonar team had already tracked it for an hour, cataloged its signature, and had fire solutions ready. If hostilities had erupted, the sub would have been destroyed within 15 seconds. By the afternoon, the U.S. turned demonstration into dominance. At 14:30, the Nimitz launched 48 aircraft in the largest single carrier display in years. Super Hornets, Growlers, Hawkeyes. The sky darkened with American air power. Then came the masterstroke. A Virginia-class submarine surfaced just 6 nautical miles from the Shandong, sat in plain view for 90 seconds, then slipped back under. By 1623, the Chinese strike group began retreating. Official statements claimed completed exercises, but the truth was obvious. They had tried to intimidate the U.S. Navy, only to be humiliated on every domain: air, sea, and undersea. The South China Sea wasn't China's lake. It never was. On June 14, 2025, it was once again proven to be America's ocean, patrolled, protected, and dominated by sailors who have spent a century perfecting blue water warfare. And for Beijing, it was a bitter reminder. Bluffing only works if the other side isn't holding every card. The aftermath in the days that followed, Beijing's state media pushed carefully crafted narratives, declaring the exercise a resounding success. But intelligence reports told a different story. Within the People's Liberation Army Navy, morale took a severe hit. Commanders who had promised strength and dominance now faced the reality that their most advanced carrier group had been shadowed, tracked, and exposed at every turn. Inside Zhongnanhai, the humbling performance forced hard conversations about China's readiness to challenge the U.S. in open waters. For Washington, the message had landed exactly as intended. Allies from Tokyo to Manila closely monitored the confrontation, reassured that American naval dominance was not only intact, but overwhelming. The sheer precision and confidence of the U.S. demonstration rippled across the Indo-Pacific, reminding both friends and rivals why the American Navy remains the cornerstone of regional security. It wasn't just about one clash, it was about credibility, deterrence, and a projection of power that couldn't be ignored. Financial markets and political circles echoed the outcome. Energy companies recalibrated shipping routes with confidence. Southeast Asian nations drew closer to Washington, and Chinese diplomats scrambled to contain the reputational damage. The confrontation of June 14, 2025, will be remembered not as a battle, but as a turning point. Without firing a single shot, the U.S. Navy had dismantled China's attempt at intimidation, proving that in the realm of modern naval warfare, presence and precision speak louder than missiles. The South China Sea was shown once again to be less a contested frontier and more an American stronghold, maintained by decades of mastery in blue water operations. For Beijing, the humiliation was a harsh lesson that global dominance cannot be claimed through posturing alone. For Washington, it was a reaffirmation of strategy, training, and technological superiority. And for the world, it was a reminder that when the stakes are highest, the U.S. Navy still sails at the top of the pyramid. History may call it a confrontation, a demonstration, or a humiliation. But in truth, it was something far greater, a masterclass in deterrence, where the ocean itself became a stage, and the sailors of the U.S. Navy delivered a performance no rival could match. What do you think? Was this a warning shot to China, or simply a reminder of America's naval dominance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of modern naval power, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories from the world's most powerful militaries.